Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On this episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 5 review. Now, it was a pretty exciting week in some ways, but in most ways, it was a quite boring week. There was a lot of games that just not much really happened. A
No.
lot of low-scoring games, especially. Now, a couple of news points before we get into the games we're going to talk about. Ronald Darby and Garrett Bowles are both out for the season for the Broncos. They both got hurt Thursday night and both went into surgeries that will keep them out for the season. So two big hits for an already struggling Broncos team. Rashad Penny will be out for the season now with a broken fibula. He was killing it for the Seahawks and had multiple 50-plus yard runs almost every game this season. He has been doing insane so far. But now the rookie from Michigan State, Kenneth Walker, steps up and takes over that starting running back role. So we'll see how he does.
Yeah, that's a bad break for Rashad Penny, who was just finally getting it going and had a couple of 100-yard games already this season.
Yeah, that is a sucky break. And then the Panthers not only lose their starting quarterback, but their head coach. The Panthers fire Matt Rule, and then later that day announced that Baker will not be playing next week with a high ankle sprain. No real timetable on him yet, but he will for sure be out next week. And Matt Rule, of course, will be out for the rest of the season, I guess.
And I said last week that if they were blown out by the 49ers, it could be the last game for both Matt Rule and Baker Mayfield. And technically, I was right.
Technically, you were right. Wow. You cursed him. Damn, that's kind of messed up, Callan. I can't believe you did that to him.
Well, that's how it goes sometimes.
And then a little bit of trade news. The Falcons are trading former All-Pro linebacker Deion Jones to the Browns. Now the Falcons are giving away Deion Jones in a 2024 7th-round pick, and in return, all they are getting is a 2024 6th-round pick from the Browns. So a great pickup for the Browns and an obvious cap dump for the Falcons team. So now we will jump on into our game, starting with the Thursday night game, and probably the most boring game of them all. Definitely some contenders this week, but I'd say this one is the worst. The Colts go into Denver and pick up a win in overtime by a thrilling score of 12-9. 7 total field goals in this game, 12 total punts. I read the stats, now I'm forgetting them. It was 30 plus 3 and out. Or sorry, not 30 plus 3 and outs, like 15 3 and outs or something like that. And the craziest part, there was 6 total fumbles, but 0 defensive fumble recoveries. Ball was constantly on the ground, but every single time it went back to the offensive team, which is a mind-blowing stat in itself, but that just shows how sloppy this game was.
It was a messy one.
Because it's not to say there was no turnovers, though, because there was 4 total interceptions between the two quarterbacks. So
That was like a Madden arcade game.
all around. If you didn't watch this game, congratulations, because you have 3 hours of your life back that no one else who did watch the
Didn't
game
miss
has.
much.
It was a struggle bus for both teams, to say the least. But nevertheless, the Colts get that mark in the win column, so that's all that really matters at the end of the day for them.
They sure earned it.
They sure earned it. Yeah, that's a word you can use. The Giants, next up, the Giants and Packers both went to the London. They both went to London, and the Giants pick up a win by a score of 27-22. Now, I predicted this as my upset. I thought Daniel Jones would have a better game. I kind of thought they would win off of Daniel Jones and his running ability, but they ended up winning off Saquon Barkley's running ability. Barkley picked up only about 70 or 80 yards, but I want to say he had 2 touchdowns. So definitely overall on the back of Barkley.
He had over 100 yards from scrimmage, including
yeah.
receiving also. And, Green Bay was up 20-0, or not 20, but up 20-10 at halftime, 17-3 at one point. And they kind of forgot to come out in the second half. And the players that did come out for the second half got stuck in the old quicksand where they thought that, things were going right, and then one thing went wrong, and another thing, and another thing. And suddenly you're in over your head and behind by 7. And that happened really fast. We allowed touchdowns on 5 or points on 5 straight defense or offensive possessions for the Giants.
That's rough. And I saw some articles that apparently Packers fans are calling for Joe Brady to be out as defensive coordinator. You heard anything about that?
Yes,
or
I've
have any
heard.
input?
I've heard that the Joe Barry firing is starting to really get riled up, and I don't know who else. Who's going to come in and replace him right now? That isn't going to be the same system, because they can't just flip their whole system and whole defensive philosophy mid-season. I think that there's a lot of season left. Let him try to figure it out, see what he does. He did really good at the end of last season. I don't know what his deal is right now, why he can't seem to cover any of those crossing routes, but I'm sure that he'll be able to get it figured out, and hopefully they will.
Thielen had about 90% of his 107, or not Thielen, Jefferson had about 90% of like his 180 yards or whatever off crossing routes. You guys definitely do struggle with those. Speaking of the Vikings, next up we got the Bears heading to Minnesota to take on the Vikings, and the Vikings pick up a win by a score of 29-22 to improve to 4-1. So best start that Kirk Cousins, I'm pretty sure, has ever had in his career, not only record-wise, but he also started the game 17 for 17 passing. 17 straight completions to start the game.
Set the team record.
Which just shows that we were firing on all cylinders. And the sad part is, kind of like that quicksand Cal was just talking about, we almost lost the game. He started 17 for 17, and we shut out the Bears in that stretch, and then almost lost the game in the next 3 quarters. So we were just lucky enough to hold on to that lead rather than losing it at the end. But little bit of a sloppy game. Everything about that game made me a little nervous for the future, outside of that first quarter, of course, because the first quarter was so good. But I noticed that's something the Vikings do a lot, is start fast and then kind of lose it. So I'm hoping that we can just work out some of those kinks that we had in the second half, because that second half wasn't even necessarily Vikings being bad. There was some bad plays, but a lot of it was the Bears came out much better in the second half and played far superior to what they did in the first half. So good win, still a mark in that win column, but definitely some things to improve on. But I'm still excited about this team.
And Justin Fields almost took over that game and won it by himself. If not for Amir Smith-Marset kind of secret agently working for the Vikings and giving a legal block in the back and a fumble right at the end of the game, Justin Fields might have brought that team back and won it by himself.
Yeah, like Alan just said, he single-handedly took away a Justin Fields touchdown with a block in the back penalty and then have that game-ending fumble. So thank you, Amir Smith-Marset. We really appreciate it. Next up, we got the Seahawks, who went to New Orleans to take on the Saints, but fell by a score of 39-22. And this game was electric, to say the least. A ton of back and forth, lots of huge plays by both teams. Both Rashad Penny and Kenneth Walker, after Rashad's injury, had a 50-plus yard touchdown. I know Alvin Kamara had a 50-plus yard reception. Taysom Hill, I want to say, had 3 rushing touchdowns, if not at least 2. So across the board, stats were put up everywhere.
Yeah, he had 3 rushing touchdowns and 1 passing touchdown.
And the passing touchdown.
So the tight end, by fantasy standards, really kind of broke the game, as they say.
I didn't get to actually watch this game, but I saw a lot of it on Red Zone, because NFL Red Zone shows all red zone drives and touchdowns, and there was a lot of those this game, a lot of big plays. So I did get to see a lot of the highlights from it, and I might have to go back and watch a highlight video of it, because it seemed to just be an absolute barn burner.
And it's starting to look like Geno Smith might have finally figured it out. 7 years in, it might have finally clicked for him, but hey, it certainly is benefiting Seattle for that. So
the poor Jets, they can never just get someone to click, in their first season.
No.
It's always like 6-7 years down the road. Okay, and then final game we're going to talk about in depth this week is the Falcons heading to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers, and the Bucs pick up a win by a score of 21-15 in the most rigged fashion that you might be able to find this week, or this whole season, I would say. There was, of course, I'm sure you've already seen a horrendous roughing the passer call, which was on Grady Jarrett of the Atlanta Falcons, which would have given the Falcons the ball in Tampa Bay territory, down by 6 with 2 or 3 minutes left. So the roughing the passer call was on a 4th down play, so it would have given them the ball if the sack would have counted. So just a complete game-changing call and an awful call overall. He takes all of the weight of Brady on top of him. Brady doesn't even touch the ground until he's rolled over completely once. Nothing in the rule book has anything against that. Grady Jarrett did not fling him any harder than any other quarterback that has been sacked that way. It was just really horrendous in my eyes. And I'm a little bit of a closet Falcons fan. Sure, yeah, you can say that I have some bias on this one. But overall, bias or not, I think the Falcons could have and maybe even should have won that game with that momentum.
Yeah, it would have been quite the comeback for them. They were down 21-0 at one point. And the referee said that the reason for the roughing the passer was that Grady Jarrett slammed Brady to the ground. And I don't know. I mean, you're going to get slammed to the ground in football. It's just part of the game. I disagree with the rule. I disagree with the call. I don't like it. It's taken all the physicality out of football.
Yeah, I totally agree. I did not like that call at all. But it's a win for the Bucs and a hell of a game by the Falcons, especially considering they were able to play that well without Kyle Pitts. So good for them. Now, as at the end of weeks from now on, we're going to do a quick little just rundown of some of the games. I'm just going to say like a sentence each for all of them. So Dolphins, Jets, Teddy Bridgewater is out and his status is still up in the air for next week. Falcons, Bucs, we just talked about. Texans, Jags, contender for most boring game of the week, up there with the Colts and Broncos.
It was 6-6 for a long time.
Almost the entire game was 6-6.
I think, in fact, the whole game except for that final drive.
Panthers, of course, still played garbage. Cowboys, Cooper Rush is now 5-0. The Eagles just barely outlast the Cardinals on a missed field goal. The Ravens play conservative and actually win in prime time and at home for once. And the Raiders decide to take over where the Ravens left off and play aggressive and lost because of it. And Devontae Adams pushed a cameraman down. So, a really exciting game in Kansas City.
Yeah. Devontae seemed to really have the competitive juices still flowing after the game. That dude got shoved to the ground hard.
You should look up the video. It is actually quite funny. But for now, that is all for this episode of Eating W's. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for our NFL Week 6 prediction episode. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.